Welcome everybody. We're back to men's issues. Again, this one's called Men in the Middle, Coping When Your Partner Won't Give Up. Now we have three straight men on our panel today who are going to talk about that, but I think a lot of gay couples will recognise some of the things that are going to be talked about as well. And we have two different groups of men on the panel. We have Wayne and Simon, who both have partners who have been surrogates, and they're going to talk to us a bit about what's it like being the partner of somebody who's a surrogate and who's going down that path. And then we've got Mark, who's on the other side of the fence, if you like. He's married to a woman who has, well, both of them have been pursuing surrogacy for a number of years. They have, I believe they have a child. How old is your child? 7. So he's going to talk about it from that angle. We're going to start off with Simon, who's going to spend a bit of time telling us about what his journey has been like. Make Simon welcome. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. So yeah, my name's Simon Cundy. My wife Rachel was up here before. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, so Rachel was in this morning up here, and after lunch, caring some of the forums. Rachel has been very active in the surrogacy and reproductive kind of community for a long time, with her work as an administrator on an egg donor website, and now with her Surrogacy in Australia website. Rachel's been through several egg pickup cycles and two surrogacies. So I've come along for the ride of what Rachel's been able to provide to a lot of families, and I'm not someone who can necessarily provide what Rachel can. Well, obviously I can't, but I don't want to be the one who ever says no to a family being created, pretty much. Through it all, there's been a lot of sickness, a lot of mood swings, anger, appointments, a lot more washing up for me. But they're all little moments which, they just fail in comparison when you see that there's a couple more families out there who've able to have children who couldn't have them before. In the last couple of years, with the actual surrogacies, obviously it's a longer term commitment. These things are 6 to 12 months of discussions and meetings, counselling, everything else before they get to the doctor. And there's a lot of pressure on, from my point of view, there's a lot of pressure on surrogates to get pregnant straight away. And when it doesn't work, that can be hard as well. So, from my point of view, that's one of the hardest things is trying to encourage Rachel to want to keep going and letting her know that it's not necessarily her fault if the cycle doesn't work. And that's where at home it's been sometimes a bit, it's tugged on the emotional strings a lot. I don't know really what else there is to say. I mean, I've just sat there and smiled and nodded. But yeah, like I said, I'm not in the position to bring any other children into the world, and I don't want to say no. So that's why that's my perspective on it. And if Rachel wants to keep going, she'll keep going. And I'll just say yes.
So, question for you is, when it's successful, at that moment when it's all successful, what's the feeling like for you? It's not really too much about me. It's relief, I suppose, but I'm more happy that Rachel's been able to achieve what she set out to achieve. I'm obviously happy that I get my wife back, but I'm more happy that the child's been brought to the world. And during the 9 months of the pregnancy, how much do you lose of your life into that sort of pregnancy?
Yeah. Look, a lot. I mean, it swings and roundabouts. As the pregnancy went on further, Rachel worked less and less, so she was at home more. And I got to see more of my wife, which was great. Except, she was pregnant and she'd go to bed early and all that type of stuff. But, it's like I say, they're all small moments. It's in the past now. And my wife's still here now, so that's what it really matters.
Thank you, Simon. Wayne, what's your perspective like on this issue?
Well, we've been married 14 years now. I'm actually a lot older than Kerry. Right? She chased me, it wasn't the other way around. Right, so basically 14 years, we've got 3 kids, one from my first marriage, 30-year-old, 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. Right, at that stage of life with the 14-year-old, I said I can't have any more kids at this age, I'm just too old. I'll be 65 by the time he's 21. Right, so basically I don't think Kerry was finished with having kids or helping out to have kids, and she became a head donor for 2 different parents for 3 kids. And then she wanted to go the extra step, and she met a couple of them on the internet, and got into them very, very well. And then I got to meet them, got talking. They are very unlucky people to not be able to have their own kids, and so I agreed to go through the process of her carrying a baby for her. Side effects to her carrying the baby was quite a few. Nausea, basically most of the way through the pregnancy. Things like toward the end of the pregnancy, she was 8 months pregnant out in the backyard at 2 o'clock in the morning, moving big breast blocks around the backyard. I think it's called nesting. Right, but things like that, these blocks are 25 kilos each, just picking them up and carrying them around. There's no baby on them. So she moved quite a few blocks around the backyard.
You're a tough girl. You're a tough girl for doing it too.
But some of the problem with the surrogacy process, like at the end with the egg donation and the surrogacy, basically it's, we've had 13 different appointments, or I've had to go to 13 appointments, not counting half the ones she's run to. Right, and just for counselling, for solicitors, for all the other appointments we had to go to, for doctors and so forth. Right, so been to numerous appointments with her. The parents have gone with her all the time. I think our biggest problem we had was the postnatal depression. It wasn't just depression, it was manic depression. Right, and she was really, really bad. 2 days after she actually had the letter, I went to work that morning. She was up sitting up crying half the night, and so I went to work, did my job, it was quickly done in the morning, went straight home for 5 days after it. Right, and made sure she was okay. Some of the things she was talking about were pretty silly, like jumping off a bridge. Right, and we've got bridges about the road from our place, in a river, and about probably 400, 500 metres from our house, and she was talking about jumping off there. Problem is she can't swim. Right? And these things that her brain was doing because of the handing over the child. Normally when you have a baby, you actually get the baby, hold the baby and so forth, right? And she didn't have that opportunity. She had held it a couple of times during the night because she stayed in the hospital with intending parents, right? And basically left the next morning, right? And they took the baby home and she went home with nothing. And that's probably one of the problems we found, right? What improved her was our counsellor said that think about having a cuddle moment with the baby afterwards. If you feel unwell, and this was planned with the parents, and you feel unwell and need extra help, then basically go and give her a call and ask her to come over and see the baby. She did that and she improved tenfold. So that's the sort of things you need to plan in the process when you're actually going through the pregnancy, and the afterwards. The afterwards I think is the more important part of it. Not going through the pregnancy, that wasn't really the hard part.
Wayne, were you aware of what likely could happen after the birth, or was this something that was a bit unexpected?
She was depressed with our last son, right, and basically, could I just point out too, he was born 11 pounds 6, he was a big baby. right? And basically, she was had a bit of depression with him, but nowhere near what she had last month with their letter.
What about you? Did you go through any depression or sense of loss?
Basically, I just took care of her, looked at the side effect. I'm actually lucky I'm a nurse, right? So I can see the signs, pick up the signs. I work in a correctional centre with a lot of mental health, and basically I seen the signs, so I went straight home after work. And I said to my boss, I'm going home. And said, we're back to work. No, I'm back in 4 days' time. And I said, we've got shifts tomorrow. Tough, I won't be here. So she had to come first.
What about you, Simon? Was there any sense of loss for you?
Not particularly. I think, given that Rachel had a lot of friends in New Zealand who had been surrogates before, she knew what to expect. And from that, I knew that I had to be fairly detached as well from the whole process of the child, because that was one of the things that her friends had been telling her. You can't think of the baby as being yours. You need to realise that that it's you're just carrying it. And I saw it like that as well. So there wasn't really any feeling of loss that it didn't feel right going home without a baby, because we knew what we were expecting.
Wayne, what was the moment? What happened when she came home and said, I want to be a surrogate for a couple? How did that conversation go?
Well, she's actually currently pregnant for the same family, and basically the answer first was no, right? Because of how she actually went through the last process, and after talking and agreeing to a few things like medication before the actual birth, and caring for her nausea before the well and truly early, before the actual delivery again, then the answer was no when she agreed to that. The funny part of it was we went over to the parents' place, or see their letter, on a few days before Christmas. Right? And what changed my mind was looking at these two parents, the way they cared for this child, made me think, yeah, just do it again. Because my wife had been asking for a few months before. They didn't look for a new surrogate. That's how I'm convinced I was not to do it again. Right? And when I said how well I looked after the child and how much I loved that child, it changed my mind. And that's what it did for me. And even the day they had when Kira delivered the baby and it was handed over to mum, the looks on their faces, the thank yous in their face was just unbelievable.
So, what about you? What was the conversation like when your wife came home and said, I want to be a surrogate?
The first time it wasn't unexpected, because she'd have been involved for many years with the egg donation. I was just went down, sure, if you think you can do it, do it. That's pretty much it. I know that Rachel was able to do it physically, and I mentally, she had the right support network with her, with all her friends in New Zealand who'd done it before. So yeah, sure, it didn't bother me the first time, and then the second time, I said, how about you think about it for a couple of months, and then next week she had something lined up. And the third time was with the third time now, I wasn't as thrilled, mainly because the last time she nearly died having the children. But like I said before, I don't want to put my foot down and say no, this is a line saying you can't do this when it's something very special that she's going to do.
Can I actually add something quickly? I do a lot of volunteer work. I've been a volunteer with St John Ambulance for over 20 years. I'm a member of the Royal Fire Service for over 10 years. Kira's been volunteering that way, so she's actually volunteered her body to have children instead. And that makes her feel good, let her do it.
Wayne and Simon, they're amazing stories, and I salute you for sharing this with me. I'm not sure that I could go through that. But let's hear from Mark now, who's on the other side of that journey with a partner who didn't want to give up, but probably Mark didn't want to give up too. But let's hear Mark's story.
Sure. Thanks for that. My name is Mark Koski. My wife and I, we've been married this year 27 years. We were married in 1987, and our daughter Anika was born in 2007. So it took us 20 years to have our daughter. It's a long story. You know, we'd been courting since we were 22. We had an up and down relationship like a lot of people do. Last couple of years decided to get married. And in 1987, we were married. Like, we're of European descent. You know, come from reasonable, extensive family, not just in Australia but internationally, and also a big sort of friends network, that we've got still today. So, our story was fairly typical: get married, wait a year or two, and decide to have some children. For us, it was sort of 12 months later. At that stage, I was living in Newcastle on a temporary sort of assignment with the organisation I was with. My wife was in Sydney. We tried to have children, couldn't happen. Went to the doctors. Most things were okay. We had a few issues that we needed to deal with, but fundamentally we felt that we could still have children sort of naturally. We got to a point where we needed assistance. We went through IVF. So Renata, my wife, had sort of 14 treatments between sort of 1990 and 2000. So over a 10-year sort of cycle, quite extensive. Ended in a hysterectomy as a result of a benign tumour. And then we sort of thought about what are our options. We went through adoption. I'm sure some of you have been down that cycle, and felt that probably, you sort of think about, well, 39, 40 at that stage, and we sort of think, maybe adoption's not for us. And the system, if any of you have been through it, doesn't make it sort of necessarily a pleasant experience. So for us, we certainly thought, well, what else is available? We came across, fortunately, a friend of ours who was a stewardess for Qantas. She indicated about a couple that had been on a surrogate program in the United States. And we thought, okay, and so Renata did some investigation there, and this is in 2001. And at that stage, the Aussie dollar was sort of 50 cents to the American dollar. You can imagine what that sort of does to your finances, right? But Renata investigated that, and we had our sort of first, Renata flew over, came back and said we should do this, And I said, right, how do we pay for that? But I rang up the lady over there and we had a good chat, and our story from 2002 was our first attempt in January of that particular year, and our first attempt was unsuccessful. Then we had a second attempt which was unsuccessful. And then we changed, at that stage, surrogates. And also obtained an independent egg donor. So we had an egg donor and then a surrogate. And we went through sort of, I think, 3 cycles for that particular donor. We had twins, which we lost, unfortunately, one at 12 weeks and one at 16 weeks. And then after that, we'd been sort of through 5 cycles at that stage, and we picked another surrogate. By the time we got through the end of that, sort of over that 5-year period, we ended up with 6 egg donors and 4 surrogates. And Katie, who was our final surrogate where Anika was born, this is in June, so it was October 2006. By that stage, you sort of get immune to the fact that you think that you're going to be successful, but sort of 8 attempts in, you sort of, you get to a point where you think, I said to my wife, we found out in October 2006 that our surrogate was pregnant. And we thought, fantastic. But I said to Renata, I said, look, until I've got a child in my hands, I just don't believe that this is possible. So Christmas came 3 months later, so 12 weeks into it, everything's going okay. Then we sort of get 16 weeks into it, everything's okay. Then I realised we're actually going on a trip to America at 20 weeks for the 20-week ultrasound. It's quite interesting when you sort of go for that. We went to the ultrasound, it was great, and everything was fantastic. We found out we were having a girl, and we were both over the moon. Anyway, from that particular stage, we, came back to Australia and had a plan to go back to the US. That was my wife went in May. I joined her about sort of in the early part of June, and we sort of spent the month there. It was probably, the best experience I can say you could have. So, we got there, and our Anika, our daughter, sort of came into the world just like clockwork. It was amazing. In fact, most people, when they're pregnant, they actually go through, sort of back in Australia, to sort of get used to the whole process. They go through prenatal classes, and we thought, what do we do for that? Like what to expect. You sort of go and pick up a child, and how do you go about actually preparing for that experience? When you first got your child, and what do you actually do? So Melinda Eels, who I know is in the audience here, has been a speaker here at the conference sort of we run, and had her come in as an independent sort of prenatal expert to help us understand what we're going to experience, what we should sort of do in those first few hours. And as the boys have been talking about, we've sort of taken into consideration our surrogate's position at the same time. We had an amazing surrogate, I would say, in the form of Katie, who we're still friends with, by the way, today, and have regular communication with her. She's gone on to be a surrogate a second time. But we sort of went through that story, and Annika was born. It was a magnificent part of our life. We spent a sort of further 6 weeks in the States, and our transition out of the States was relatively sort of straightforward. We'd had it all planned beforehand. We had a good lawyer over there. We had Annika actually, because of she was, what am I trying to say? She was, we were able to obtain an Australian residency for her while we're in the States, and there was a whole portal that we got organised. But that process for us sort of went relatively smoothly, I got to say, in the States. So we had Annika, we came back, and we sort of felt very positive about our sort of family now. But my wife, being a persistent person she is, I've got to say, the boys talked about sort of the feeling, about their wife. Certainly my wife Renata, is a very persistent person. She's a sort of, person that I could have, halfway through, for the blokes in the room, I could have halfway through easily given it away. Because I just got to a point where I just thought it's just too much. It's costing us a fortune. It's costing us everything. We sold everything, including efficiency. But we've gone through that entire process, and then my wife said to me, she wants to have a sibling. I thought, Jesus Christ. So, unfortunately, we went, the conversation with the last couple of boys was about, at what point do you say no? And I've got to say, we had, our journey hasn't been an easy one, but it was, we had sort of another sort of 6 attempts, or 7 attempts actually, sorry, 7 attempts at having a sibling for Annika. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in that journey. And we had 5 attempts in the States, and we had 2 attempts in India, both on a number of occasions. On 3 occasions, we had singletons or twins. We usually lost at about 12 weeks, or up to 16 weeks. So we've been through, in total, through our journey, which is a period between 2002 and 2012. And I guess, somebody had to say, sooner or later, you've got to say, be thankful for what you do have. And certainly it was me. So I got to a stage in 2012 where we said that was kind of where we had to stop, and we just be thankful for what you do have in life. And we'd had 15 attempts, and I think we gave it a fair shot. And sometimes you've got to realise also, maybe when your odds are against you, we had one successful attempt in 15 sort of attempts, so maybe the odds weren't necessarily stacked for us. But regardless, I can say that life's been fantastic with our daughter. She's here this afternoon, and as is my wife. Sorry, this is a bit of an emotional sort of conversation at the same time, but I'm sure that for a lot of you, when I speak to the guys, for most of you, sort of say, how do you cope with managing relationships, finances, and sanity? Well, managing relationships, I'm still married as a start. I'm not living in the garden, and we've got to build it. So that's about the best example I can say, how you can make 1 + 1 = 3.
Thanks, Mark. That was really great. And Wayne, Simon, thank you very much. We've got a couple of minutes, I think, before I have to bring on our next speaker. But has anybody got any questions for anyone on the panel? Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment on Mark. That's an amazing story. Congratulations on surviving all of that. And I think what we do, I'm a reproductive endocrinologist and IVF specialist, and what we try to do is we try to optimize results. And using egg donation surrogacy, the pregnancy rates are very high. But I think your history really illustrates that even though we try to do the best that we can, human biology has all these unknowns. And I think sometimes we overemphasize how high the pregnancy rates are and how easy it is. And your story really illustrates it's not always easy, even in the best possible conditions.
Yeah.
Very true. And I think we have another question. Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. I believe one of Simon's last night, we had quite a significant health risk. You said you would die. I wonder what that was like for you, when you have your own children, and what it was like for you, the recovery for you, the children, the support of you at that very vulnerable.
Yeah, that was interesting. I went to work one day. Rachel was around 26, 27 weeks pregnant with twins, and got a phone call saying she has called the ambulance. She's bleeding everywhere. She had a sensible blood abruption. Got raced to the hospital, lost a litre and a bit of blood. I took a photo of her while we were in the hospital because I thought that was the last time I'd get a photo of her. But it all worked out well. It was, I think, very rare, unlucky, whatever you could say, that Rachel had that mishap, or had that medical event happen. So try and plan for the future the best way we can. And I don't think we're not going into another surrogacy thinking, oh, that's going to happen, or we need to make extra plans. We'll see what happens, but it's not something that I'm terribly worried about happening again. I think we've had the worst luck that we could have had. So,
guys, thank you again for joining us, and I think it really does highlight the fact that surrogacy is an emotional roller coaster. It doesn't matter who you are in the process, it is an emotional roller coaster for everyone. So join me again and thank